Hello YouTubians, it's Willow here. I'm here to do a little video today on a dietary issue, and as you can tell by the title of this video, it's on the fact that low-carb diets, which are a huge craze right now and have been for a number of years, can cause hormone problems in some people. And I'm one of those people. So I'm basically here as a cautionary tale to tell people that low carb is not a solution across the board for everyone. Okay, so just a little bit of background as far as my interest in health. In 2009, I was poisoned fairly severely by a fluoroquinolone antibiotic called ciprofloxacin. And fluoroquinolone antibiotics are a very dangerous class of drug. There are a number of name brands, including Cipro, Levaquin, Avelox, Noroxin, Floxin. There's a number of generic brands, so you have to do your research into them. They're a very dangerous class of antibiotics that should never be prescribed as a first-line antibiotic for minor infections. And that is how they are being prescribed almost across the board. That is how they were prescribed to me. I was prescribed Cipro as a mild antibiotic for a very minor urinary tract infection, and I had my health completely devastated. Fluoroquinolone antibiotics cause a number of side effects, often long-term, sometimes permanent. And one of the main things is that they break down your tendons and your connective tissue. They cause basically all over body pain and dysfunction, to the point that some people are bedridden, some people are in wheelchairs. Luckily, most people do improve from their worst points, but very dangerous. Peripheral neuropathy, which is an inflammation of the nerves, which causes all over body pain, vision damage, tinnitus, chemical depression and anxiety that literally does not let up for potentially years at a time, chronic insomnia, organ damage, aortic dissection, all of these extremely dangerous and life-threatening issues. Fluoroquinolones have killed tens of thousands of people, possibly in the hundreds of thousands. They have debilitated in the millions of people. So these are antibiotics that should never, again, be used as a first-line antibiotic to treat a minor infection. The labels on these drugs have very recently been updated after decades and decades of them being misused and misprescribed. But still, even with the updated labels, these antibiotics are often being prescribed by physicians as first-line antibiotics. So the real danger of these things has not trickled into the mainstream medical establishment. So before you take an antibiotic of any kind, do your research. And not only on fluoroquinolones, do your research on any pharmaceutical before you actually put it in your mouth. Okay, that's the overall disclaimer. Okay, so in 2009, I had my health completely devastated by these drugs, and I have been working with my diet, because I find that diet and good quality water are probably the two hallmarks for the level of improvement that I have seen. So 2009, I started a process of refinement of my diet that continues to this day. Okay, so I'm always refining and experimenting and that kind of thing. One of the things that fluoroquinolones cause is severe digestive problems and severe food sensitivities. Okay, so as all part of this, that I won't go into the nitty-gritty details, but as all part of this, I've had to find a very limited diet to eat, so limited numbers of foods. And what happens is that I have weird reactions to foods that happen because of the damage that's been done to my digestive system and the inflammation that's caused and all of this kind of thing. So most recently, what happened was I started reacting badly to anything starchy or anything with fruit sugar in it, basically, like fruit or anything starchy like beans, lentils, quinoa, anything of that nature. So what I did was I eliminated all the foods that I thought were causing the problems. And what it ended up with was being on a low carb diet. Now, I am a person who was always leery of the low carb diet craze, and for good reason. Now, I will say as well, I don't believe that there is a one size fits all diet for everyone. So I don't think that there's one diet out there that works for every body, every system. I think one thing that I've really learned through this recovery process is that everyone's body is so different and is sensitive to different things and responds differently to different things. So, and if you've been poisoned by fluoroquinolone, that's even more so the case because your body is intensely sensitized because of the damage that's been done. So basically what I've learned is that there is no one size fits all, and that you can't just sort of follow a program that helped someone else or that worked for someone else and expect it to necessarily work for you. It might work for you. It might be the exact opposite of what you need. It might cause more damage to you, okay? Health is such a complex issue. And and I'm also going to say that I'm not preaching about any one thing. I'm basically just here as a cautionary tale, right? Because I've learned the hard way through these past 7.5 years of trial and error and trying different things. So, basically I'm just letting people know what I've learned, okay? And you can take it or leave it. So basically, the problems that happened with the being on the low carb diet, again, just through process of elimination of foods that were causing issues at the time, was that my hormones became very disrupted. And the first thing that I noticed was the girls shrank. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I've just lost a little bit of weight and maybe that's where I've lost it. But, don't know exactly. But then the next thing I realized was that, I haven't gotten my period this month. So that's not good. That's a sign that the hormones are, very out of whack. I was having problems with exhaustion, severe exhaustion, and feeling that no matter how much food I ate, I felt hungry all the time. Okay, so in other words, and I was also having feeling very cold at times as well. So all of this is an element of like thyroid function, hormones, all of that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, well, it's got to be the elimination of these starchy foods and these these sugars, basically these carbs, because that's the only thing that I've really done differently. So I started doing a little bit of online research, and of course, the main thing that you see when you start researching low carb diets is just everyone singing their praises, right? And just there's just website after website and like wannabe health guru after wannabe health guru, and just this furor. And I actually noticed this when the paleo craze or the low carb craze started. Whenever there's sort of like a furor about things, you have to take a step back and think, okay, there's something over the top about this, and they're more than likely missing the boat on some of the finer details, right? It almost becomes a little bit cult-like, the mindset. And as soon as people get on this diet, they want to preach to the world, the way you're living is not right. The way you're doing it is not right. You have to get on this low carb diet. This is the only way to health. This is the only way to sustain yourself, yada, 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 right? So people go very over the top with it. And that turned me off like I said, from the beginning. So like, I don't know, 10 years ago when this started becoming a very popular diet, that really kind of turned me off, because I thought, how are they to say that everyone's body does well with these foods and doesn't do well with these foods? Like, I didn't really understand. And I still believe that. I still think that there are certain things that I think again, they call it the standard American diet, so standard North American diet. There are certain things that I think people can cut out and see beneficial effects probably across the board, right? Like refined sugar. There aren't too many cases where people need regular doses of refined sugar, I don't think, right? Processed food in general, I think, is something that you can cut out of your diet and not see any ill effects from it, and probably will only see beneficial effects. Alcohol and caffeine, those are two other things that I think, at least limiting it, right? So not necessarily eliminating, but limiting it. You'll also more than likely take some stress off your body, okay? Drinking filtered water, so water that has the chlorine and contaminants filtered out of it, non-fluoridated water. Those are all things I think that anyone pretty much across the board could do and see benefits. That said, I think that some people's bodies, some people have that like cockroach survival, right? They can basically, it seems anyway, that they can basically ingest anything and it really doesn't have too much of an effect. So, again, I'm not preaching about this stuff, but basically when you go any further from that, I think that it's very individual, okay? So cutting out dairy, cutting out gluten grains, cutting out, nightshades, cutting out, all of these elements have an individual experimentation element to it, right? So you have to sort of experiment with the reactions that your body's having to these foods, okay? Again, then there's non-gluten-free grains. So there's gluten-free grains there. So there's things like quinoa and lentils and other those actually aren't grains, but other grains that are gluten-free that may or may not be causing issues. On the paleo diet, beans are not allowed, right? So you can't have beans, you can't have legumes at all. So again, it's an experimental process. I think that we can often do best on hybrid diets. So it isn't like a set standard, this is the way it has to be. It's kind of a constantly fluctuating diet. Okay. So for me, what I found, I obviously had to start adding some starches back in because the hormones were out of control. I had no energy. I felt terrible. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's a sign that it's working." If you feel terrible, especially with the anti-candida diet, if you feel terrible, if you feel like you're dying, that's basically a sign that it's working. So just keep on going. No, okay? Feeling like you're dying and like having no energy to, maybe for a few days or something, they say like, "Oh, that's the healing crisis." No, it isn't. When you feel like absolute death and can't even drag yourself through a day for weeks or months on end, like there's something going wrong. There's something going wrong there. Our bodies are not really designed to be in these like sort of severely restricted diets for hugely long periods of time. And, maybe some people's are, but definitely not across the board. Because again, I'm here to tell you that I'm a person who cannot live on low carbs, and I do need certain starches. And I would say that probably mostly for women, this is often the case. I was doing digging a little bit of research, and again, I'm not a huge studies person because I think depending on who's funding the study and depending on the results that they want to come up with, But anyway, there was a study done on 20 16-year-old girls who were put on low carb diets. 45% of them had menstrual problems, and 30% of them, so 6 out of the 20, stopped menstruating altogether, okay, on these low carb diets. So this is just, again, an indicator that these don't work for everyone. This is not the be all end all for everyone. And, it's actually really dangerous, I think, for these sort of like wannabe health gurus to be out there preaching that this one diet or this one supplement or this one whatever is going to work for everyone, because it's just such an individualized situation. Yeah. So that's about all I have to report. Like I said, I've added some starches back in, and one thing I wanted to mention was one of the starches that I've added back in is sweet potatoes, and sweet potatoes are a very high source, a very good source of vitamin A. They give you about 400% of your daily recommendation of vitamin A. Sweet potatoes in general are more nutritionally dense than white potatoes. So both sweet potatoes and white potatoes have vitamins and minerals that are beneficial. They both provide fiber, but sweet potatoes have kind of an upped dose. They also have more sugar though, right, than white potatoes. So, but basically sweet potatoes, because of their vitamin A content, sweet potatoes are what we should be growing and feeding for the poverty-stricken who are vitamin A deficient, not genetically modified rice. Okay, so there's actually a very simple, dietary solution for vitamin A deficiency, and it's sweet potatoes. Okay, that's the situation. What I'm doing right now is, and this seems to be working for me. Again, just take it for what it is to have to kind of fluctuate between low carb and then have certain days where I add in a little bit of starch or a little bit of fruit, okay, whole fruits, and that seems to be regulating things a little bit better. My energy levels are definitely a lot better. So I will say that, I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place because I have these food sensitivity issues which cause inflammation, cause my back to go out, cause my, tendons to be dysfunctional and to really affect my mobility, and basically puts me in, chronic pain situations. So there's a fine line between the level of starch or the kinds of starch that will cause that type of reaction and the hormone problems that are caused by scaling too far back. Okay, so it really is, I think, a balance and a mix. And these elimination diets can absolutely have a place in dealing with a chronic health issue. Okay, so for example, leaky gut, healing your leaky gut, cutting out all grains, all dairy, all processed foods, all sugar, following the very specific, very limited leaky gut diet for a period of time can definitely help your digestive system. Again, following the anti-candida diet for a period of time, following the low carb diet for a period of time, can definitely work as a sort of medicinal diet. But to maintain it and to continue it for like months or years at a time, that can be dangerous. So I think that there's like a happy medium that people can find depending on their own body chemistry, their own system. And what seems to be working for me is, again, that combination of low carb days with a little bit with the certain days where I have a little bit of starch or a little bit of fruit brought in, and hopefully over a long enough time frame, I'm going to be able to add those in on a daily basis, right? A small amount on a daily basis, and that I won't have the kind of anti-inflammatory or the inflammatory response to starches and that sort of thing. So that's the basic point that I'm trying to make, is that low carb diets can be dangerous. Low carb diets can cause hormone problems, particularly I would say in women. And basically they can tell our bodies that like we're starving to death and we're not getting enough food to reproduce, right? And that would be one of the reasons why our menstruation is actually stopping on these diets. The same can be said also for supplements. Okay, that's one other point I'd like to make, is that supplements are not a one-size-fits-all situation either. What helps one person can definitely harm another person. Okay, and I've been a guinea pig for that so many times in this recovery process from the fluoroquinolones, because you try different things that have worked for other people, and it can cause an even worse reaction, right, in you. So again, take control of your own system, your own body. You can look to the internet and look to these books and look to these wannabe gurus for guidance, but ultimately it's your responsibility to gauge your own body's responses, and it's your responsibility as far as what you're putting into your body and what you aren't putting into your body. Don't follow, if you're feeling terrible on one of these diets, don't just keep going with it. Don't just hope for the best. Something needs to give, something needs to change. And I think a little bit of flexibility and relaxing the stress around food and around what you can have and what you can't have. Obviously there are certain foods that you absolutely know your body has a bad reaction to. For me, I developed severe allergies to gluten, grains, and dairy, to the point where they cause cellulitis infections on my face. So this sort of rapidly spreading bright red infection growing on my face. So skin infection. So yeah, I know that I cannot eat dairy or gluten, grains. At this point, right? Maybe at some point I'll be brave enough to try it again. But at this point, I know absolutely those are off limits. I know absolutely that processed foods are off limits because I react horribly to those. I know, I know just through trial and error that there are certain things that I can't bring back into my diet. And that's a process that everyone's so busy these days. It's hard. We've gotten to a point where we're disconnected from what our body's trying to tell us and from the reactions to our bodies. And I think that that's being done intentionally, to be honest. But it's well worth it to get back in touch with that and to read the signals that your body's giving you. And I just don't want, I just want to be able to have people learn from my mistakes, learn from the trial and error that I've put in. And yes, I wish you all good health in these trying times that we're living in.